Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few of my friends gather together and tell stories. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we're here to tell you, my friend, a story. Welcome back to episode 2 of Trouble in Party Town. Last week, we discussed some primary world building of a story that we've titled Trouble in Party Town. And I will give you a short recap now, and then we'll dive in to our next story elements and our next phase of the story building. So last week, the story elements were Levi had government type, Reed had something based on a book you're reading, and Seth had magic system. The short recap is this. It's a medieval style world. About 120 years ago, this country that's centered around this was kind of formed through rebellions and wars and various conflicts. And there were many heroes in the fight. And one of the things that happened was the new founded king sort of declared feast days for all of the fallen heroes, right? There was I think, was it 13 of them or something like that, or 20 of them? I don't remember exactly, but there were a number of heroes and there were feast days sort of spread throughout the year for them. And in order to facilitate this, he created a party planning commission, a council, a group of people who were in charge of making these festivals. Now, 120 years later, that party planning commission has kind of grown to a bureaucratic bloat. They sort of control everything. The king, Xander, I believe is his name, only has control of the coffers. And even that, he pretty much just kind of rubber stamps everything that the party planning commission wants from him. He's the hero, so this is the story of how he kind of wrestles back control of himself and of the country from the hands of the sort of bureaucratic bloat that exists. Read something based on a book he's reading. I don't remember, Read, because you had 2 different books. I don't remember what you actually settled on.
I settled on Cold Mountain.
Yeah. And what was the theme?
Yeah, the Cold Mountain is a historical novel set with fictional characters set in the closing part of the Civil War, and there was a wounded Confederate soldier that was just trying to make his way back home. And back home, they had the home guard, they were called. And what they would do is they would scavenge. They had to get supplies, so they would go and just steal everything that wasn't tied down. And it was necessary for the war effort. But what happened was you had women whose men were off fighting in the war. They were left destitute, and there was a lot of the law and order had broken down. And there's the sheep and the wolves and these roving bands. They were given supposedly official positions in the home guard, but they were just a bunch of bandits, and they just was rape and pillage and horrible. And the whole concept of the sheep and the wolves sort of breakdown of society. And this hero coming home had several encounters where he was able to stand up for sheep being exploited and kind of take it to the wolves. So he was like the sheepdog. He was like a tough guy, and he knew how to fight, and he was a veteran of the war, but he was not a bad guy. He did not exploit, his power. And I kind of settled on that theme as this Xander, the kind of the hero, is kind of the sheepdog character, because he's kind of a hesitant hero, but he kind of gets manipulated into declaring this crusade against the bandits and stuff that were coming down from the north, and so he leaves on a festival leading the army to fight the bandits, but he is really trying to restore kind of the dignity of the individual and rule of law, where the people that are power feel, the work for the bureaucracy, they've taken their power and overstepped their bounds, and he wants to bring justice, I guess.
And he doesn't want to at originally.
Right. He's kind of a reluctant hero.
Yeah, he's kind of surrounded by a bunch of experts who are the descendants of a bunch of the heroes who are kind of pushing him along.
Right.
as I remember it.
Yeah.
Seth's magic system from last week was fire. So this world does not use fire in its conventional way. There are bioluminescent rocks and things. There are certain stones that you pour water on them and they heat up. That's what people mostly use for heat and light. And so fire is kind of like a trick or like a special thing that only certain people can make. But when you make it, it kind of mesmerizes, hypnotizes, kind of turns people a little bit more. I imagine you kind of like turn people a little bit more suggestive. It kind of like makes them, because it's mesmerizing. It's different from what you've seen. And I imagine it has some magical element as well. Is that what you were thinking, Seth?
Yeah, it'd be like a special thing where like some storyteller might have people gather around and it'll draw people into that thing that he's doing, or like a leader will like hold a torch, and charge into battle, and it draws people to his standard, and
right,
it's kind of that, it's just volatile and kind of the what's going on behind it, and but it is a very drawing, mesmerizing element.
Absolutely.
That plays its hand into kind of how it's being used.
Absolutely. What else? So that was last week. Now we're launching into this week. What elements did you guys draw last time for this week?
I have unique pet.
I have the Ka-tet.
And I have villain. Should I go first with villain, you think? I feel like that would be an interesting, because we kind of need someone to set against. It's maybe not so much villain as it is just like antagonist.
Okay.
He might not be technically evil, but he is kind of set against our hero, and then what we see kind of forming our hero's troop of this, 300 lances. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but this kind of war party that was set out kind of in an unprecedented way from the city. He declared a special crusade. He was kind of manipulated by the scribes who, were on the countryside and not on the party planning commission side. He was kind of manipulated. And then in a moment of weakness, just irritation at the party planning committee, he declared this kind of crusade to go out and address these bandits, which have been sort of seeing more frequency up in the northern area of the country. And in doing so, he kind of removed himself from the monotony of day-to-day life and removed himself from the kind of overarching view of the party planning committee. So our villain, our antagonist, is kind of like have you guys both read or seen Les Miserables?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is kind of like a Javert style of person, right? So Javert in the story of Les Miserables is a commissioner, a police officer, a detective kind of guy who holds to the rule of law as an absolute, right?
Yeah.
So I think in like D&D terms, we're talking like a lawful good, like a paladin who brokes no change from the decreed right and true, right? I think of like Galad from the Wheel of Time series, who's too honest even for his own good. I'm rereading the Wheel of Time. That's why my brain went to that. So what we have here is Xanthith, and he is sort of the highest order of the party planning commission's kind of personal guards / the will of their sword, right? The sword of their will, right? He holds the highest place. And one of the ways that he has secured this is that he celebrates every single festival to its explicit written instructions, right? That's how he holds this highest place. So he has a tome, which is like a giant ledger, and he faces the right sunrise on the day of harvest. He washes his feet in the spring water after the first thaw. He follows it all, right?
Yeah.
And also through that, he is a man of physical violence, right? So he stands about 6'5" feet tall, broad shoulders, an idyllic hero type look to him. Square jaw, beautiful face. He wears all white. He is the poster child, basically. And he sort of reads the party planning commission's kind of list of festivals and how to follow them a bit like a scripture, right? And that's kind of how he enforces the party planning commission's will. So he is in fact a little bit responsible for allowing the Xander and his like group of lances and pack horses and farriers and all the things that went out in this campaign. He's partially responsible for allowing them to, because it was a public decree. In fact, there are corrupted elements within the party planning commission that tried to get him to stop them from leaving, because they saw what was coming, and he wouldn't do it because it was a official festival put on by the commission. Therefore, it was in fact the morally right thing to do to let them go, right?
Yeah.
And so the party planning commission has like this love-hate relationship with him, because they love the fact that he does all these things and that he sort of upholds their law and order, but they also hate him because he upholds everything with law and order, right? So some elements inside of the commission and some elements inside of this bureaucracy would like sort of greasier hands, would like sort of a a slipperier conscience,
Yeah.
to get things accomplished. But they have to sort of, when he is around and the sort of the under officers that he has trained personally are kind of doing things, everything is by the book, and everything is by the book, but they can't make a party that says you get to kill the person you don't like. There's some underlying rules for like how this commission can operate. And so they can't just say, oh, this is the festival of killing the people that the party planning commission doesn't like. Okay, Xanath, go and kill all those people. They can't manipulate him in that way. So they manipulate him in subtler ways, right? So he initially lets Xander and all of his war party go. And then I'd say about like 2 weeks later or something, the parts of the commission begin to change certain edicts and rules, and then he gets called up to essentially pursue them, right? He gets lied to and convinced that they left before the festival was fully instated. So he gets an incredible amount of guilt, that he in fact did not follow his holy scriptures correctly. And in his mind, he was convinced that he needs to go and pursue them in order to rescue the king, because the king is being manipulated by these kind of outside forces, these councilmen, these weird scribes and grizzled old war heroes, and these people who like are lying to the king about what is true and not true, right? And what we see throughout it is he leaves, he goes out with his own war party and begins to pursue them. And what I would say, he could turn into the villain or not, depending on if he begins to sort of compromise certain parts of his moral code in order to accomplish his overarching mission. If he starts to say things like, well, it's okay if I torture this one fisherman or this one ferryman, because the ferryman clearly ferried Xander across, but he's not telling us which way they went. So it's okay if he takes that path, then he could turn into a villain. If not, he's just an antagonist who's confused about what's right and wrong, but ultimately wants what's, I'm doing air quotes, right, but he's following a corrupted master, basically. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the antagonist, and he will leave a couple of weeks after Xander and his group leaves, and will basically be sort of following them, but then eventually there'll be some kind of reckoning, I imagine there'll be like 2 or 3 meetings. They'll meet once and he'll let them go because he bows to the king's authority. And then they'll meet again, and he'll try to stop them, but they'll force their way out, and then he'll meet them again, and this time it'll just be like, if I can't convince you to come with me, I need to kill you, or at least everyone around you, sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Just as a story progression thing. So, yeah. Do you guys have anything interesting world building ideas you have, or any interesting you want to add your elements in now? Or I'm thinking that this whole time, Xander was not really allowed to learn the sword or a weapon, but he was allowed to learn like polo. Polo's the game that's on horseback, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So he was allowed to learn polo, but it was a really unique and weird form of polo. So it's not called polo, obviously. It's a game on a horse. But essentially what he was learning is all the steps needed to fight from horseback and with a lance without having an armored horse, armor, and a lance in his hand. You know, it was one of the ways that the battle master, who was his teacher, was able to sort of teach him how to fight without actually teaching him how to fight, you know, because they were in such a time of peace that the Party Planning Commission has their yearly like end of all war festival. And so like, why would you need to learn how to fight? Because we've ended all wars, right? And so in this 2 weeks, at least beginning in this 2 weeks, but then progressing into the time of more harried interaction with Xanath, there's sort of a change that starts to take place in Xander's life where he's like responsible for making edicts and saying things that they will or won't be, you know, where he's not been sort of even though he's the king, he's not really used to that level of authority, but that gets kind of thrust on him. And then there's all of the sort of forgotten things that he needs to learn in order to actually like be responsible for himself, you know, like caring for his horse and caring for himself, and you know, what's the life of his subjects, you know, which is a bunch of stuff that he starts to see that sort of helps convince him and helps kind of move him over to the side of we need to do something about this, but no one wants to say anything about it because to like speak out against it, you know, is to like come under the scrutiny of the Party Planning Commission, which no one wants to do.
Yeah. Cool.
Do you want to do your unique pet, or do you want me to do the Ka-tet?
Yeah, I think I want to throw in the unique pet because it's kind of based around the pet belongs to Xander, so I'm going to throw that out. And it kind of, this is sort of, I sort of feel a little bit cheesy with this unique pet because it was such a no-brainer based on the magic type, but the magic system. But anyway, when Xander was like 12 years old, there was a mining crew on his father's land that suffered an accident. And what happened, some workers broke through a rock face, causing an explosion. And what happened was there were two of the miners were badly burned. What happened, the theory was that they had broken into a sealed chamber. And when the oxygen came in, there were chemicals within this chamber that ignited, so that just a roar of flame went rushing out, you know. So and then, you know, and then it burned itself out because once the fuel, whatever was flammable, right, it just extinguished itself. But when they went in and checked, there was you know, it was a weird chamber, and it was much bigger than in the side, kind of a hillside or a side of a mountain like thing. And they found remains of these huge eggs that had been crushed and incinerated by the fire. And they were like, I mean, people came in to study them, and they came to the conclusion that there was beings that were much, very, very large, because these eggs were huge, bigger than any bird eggs or anything that they had seen around, you know. And anyway, much against, completely without permission.
Right.
Xander went in there like a 12-year-old kid and was poking around. And he was poking around with a stick, and under the where the fire had kind of been the hottest, it was like a sandy area where the fragments of these shells and stuff were. He was poking around, and he found a shell. He found an egg that had been buried. under the
Nice.
and of course you all see where this is going, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. And of
There were
course
turtle eggs.
yeah, no, the dragon is born and of course looks at Xander and says, "Mom," the whole bonding kind of thing.
Right.
And it's a race, a very long-lived race, so this little fledgling uh dragon takes a long time to grow up, but he's completely the dragon's completely bonded to Xander, and he is kind of forced to take care of it. And it's because his family is wealthy, he's able to come up with enough to feed it and everything, but they develop a psychic bond. And it was really handy because one of the earlier conflicts that happened in his life is that this was Xander was a horseman already by the time he's 12, and so he had to train this creature was freaking out the horses, but so he had to use his psychic bond to teach this dragon to chill and to be decent and kind to the horses and not scare them. And still, however, a horse that was not, he could scare just about anybody, any horse, which of course it causes all kinds of possibilities with the psychic bond. So he could kind of turn off being a fearsome, ferocious beast that could of course breathe fire, which in this culture had completely interesting
elements
to it. Yeah. That we're talking about. There's repercussions, but anyway, Xander has this unique pet, and it is more than a pet. It's like a companion, and but because of his psychic bond, and he's able to teach teach the dragon to behave. He's really kind and gentle with people and with horses and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But of course, he can be as fearsome as he needs to be. If he should say, "Oh, these horses that the bad guys are on, you could scare them all you want," So anyway, I just thought that was kind of a fun. It was kind of, I feel a little bit embarrassed because it's such a cheesy, it just landed. I mean, 30 seconds after I had Unique Pet, I said, "Oh yeah, fire breathing dragon."
Oh yeah, it's gotta be.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I'm going with it. So go ahead.
And
Seth.
that's an interesting thing, because I was thinking, as you were talking about this, I was thinking about it, and I was like, why does fire have this magic?
Yeah.
It could be something like, because there were a lot more dragons around.
Yeah.
And fire literally, like, people remember, there's this idea of like genetic memory.
Yes.
It's like you remember something based on the fact that your ancestors remembered it, and it's like coded into your. So that's why fire is such this kind of like captivating and almost fearful thing. Maybe at one time dragons were the majority of the population.
Yeah. In fact, before you even brought up that idea when we were talking about in the recap, Levi, I had written down as part of what my notes for introducing my story element is that this because this psychic bond that Xander has with the dragon, people could be mesmerized by the fire, right? And were susceptible to suggestion, which is almost word for word for what you said. And with his psychic bond, he could the dragon could use his psychic ability to place suggestions into the minds of people. But yet he was strictly disciplined from the time he was an egg, that you don't do this, how do you put it? You have to be responsible. The whole thing of when you have a superpower, those who have been given great power have been given great responsibility. And because of kind of the Xander's kind of built-in love of justice and hating bullies, he's really careful, on how to, this is not power that should fall into the hands of evil people.
Or here's another idea. It's the other way around, Reed, where Xander, of course, was a selfish prince, and the dragons were the nobler race.
Ooh.
and the dragons were the ones who taught. The dragon was that's why Xander has this, is because the dragon itself imparted to Xander because the way you're talking about it makes me think that there's some sentience. It's not just like a dog.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that fits much better. Like, why wouldn't this young noble, not be kind of a spoiled brat? And it's so natural for people that have authority or have inhabit the higher social strata of a culture. They tend to be, it's hard to teach them anything but abuse of power.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Hey, that's really a great, I like that idea a lot. Okay.
Yeah. And were you thinking dragon like with wings? Because I was thinking the way you were talking about this, I was like, well, eventually he's going to ride the dragon, and then it's going to be pretty much.
No, I was thinking when you were bringing because he's a horseman, the dragon isn't really. I think he's big, but he's not. The physics, you have to be really, really big to be like carrying people around on your back. Birds are very lightly built. Their bones are very thin and hollow. The idea, you have to be a really big bird to start carrying off a kid.
I just had this vision. Okay, so let's say that this world is in fact the dragon's world, right?
Yeah.
So these rocks, right, they heat up when they get water on them.
Yep.
I had this vision of a dragon, kind of like the conformation of like a Komodo dragon, like the look of a Komodo dragon.
Yeah.
But like half again the size, or half the size of a horse, basically.
Yeah.
And he would go over, and there's all these different types of rocks. And so he would like chew the rock that would make fire.
Yep.
And then like under the scales underneath his body would begin to like glow red. And then he could like fly for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he'd find another rock that grows or that exists near the water, and he'd chew on that rock, and then like underneath, like gills would open up and he would be able to be underwater.
Ooh, cool.
Or, so there's like different areas of the world will offer this dragon different abilities, I guess. Mm-hmm. Because if we say the world is built for the dragons, and humans are just we came through a portal, a couple 100 years ago and begin to wage war on the dragons, and then most of the dragons are gone now, but still what's left over is the remnants.
Yeah.
Like fire you can't, you don't have fire until you mix whatever they're breathing, whether it be oxygen or something else, with dragon shells.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why fire is rare, but also a closely guarded secret, is because it's essence of dragon.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Wow, guys, this story is starting to sound like something I would read.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide if the quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes again, bandits that they're going to confront are in fact a neighboring country trying to encroach on their country again.
Yeah, that was sort of intimated a little bit, like these guys to the north, and they had kind of infiltrated, and then they're kind of raising havoc as roving bands of roving groups of bandits, something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if that's how I would do it if it was D&D. You guys would defeat the bandits, and then as you were searching for loot, you'd pull off one of their leather jerkins, and underneath would be the sigil of a neighboring country, and you'd be like, ooh, intrigue. So I don't know if that's like a fair enough intrigue.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I want out of Xander is I'm sure all three of you guys, because I know you guys have experienced this, which sorry if I'm telling on you, but like being thrown into deep water and then being washed out into deeper water as soon as you kind of get your bearings a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's kind of the thing I'm thinking about with Xander, is that like he gets thrown into deep water. He's going to go on this adventure. He's going to go on this campaign. It's not an adventure, it's a campaign, right? And that's a new thing. And he gets his feet underneath him a little bit, and then it kind of ramps up a little bit, and then it just continues to ramp up. And at some point in time, he has to learn that, like, it's not about having sure footing everywhere along the way. It's about having internally sure footing, you know? It's not about knowing what the next thing is. It's about doing the next right thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of the hero arc I was thinking about with him. So he never reaches the place like a lot of people reached. I'm thinking of a couple of different books. Like I was thinking of Wheel of Time. I don't know if any of our listeners have ever read it, but the main character kind of reaches a place that he's like, okay, this is who I am. I'm going to do this. And then he is capable. And there's things he doesn't know how to do and whatever still, but I'd like this to be the first book of Xander not quite reaching that place. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Like relying heavily on the support of his sort of cohort of advisors, and then only at the last part of the book, which I imagine might happen, or the story might happen where one or all of them die.
Mm-hmm.
And like not being able to constantly ask, what should I do? But having to be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing now. You know what I mean? That kind of transition from I can do what's right, but only because people are telling me to do or telling me how to do what's right, to I'm going to make the decision to do what's right myself. Anyways.
Okay.
Seth, do you have some
Yeah.
Ka-tet members or some world building?
Yeah. Okay. So, trying to figure out how to do. I mean, I know the whole Ka-tet idea, just trying to like put together how like it all comes together. But okay. So,
Right.
sometimes what you have, I know this is kind of, if anyone has read the Dark Tower series, which is where the idea of the Ka-tet comes from. Right, it's kind of a group of people drawn together by fate, and if you're not familiar with the Dark Tower, think probably a lot more people might be familiar with, the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship,
Right.
that kind of trope in a lot of things. The Fellowship, that group of people that stumble upon each other, through some act of fate, and find themselves, bound together for some either particular mission or something happening throughout, the story. In this case, so drawing from at least what I think I would have drawn or understood from the Dark Tower, where you have Roland is kind of like they are drawn together by fate to him.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not like, and so he's kind of like the one they all look up to. They're all drawn together. They're part of this group, but he's the din. That's probably the word I was looking for to describe that. That kind of, right. It's his Ka-tet. It's, for that thing that he has going on. Right. And so the din of this group is what you would consider kind of a roving, magician. He does, he dabbles in the art of fire.
Right.
He's a bit of a scoundrel. I say scoundrel. I'd probably use this idea of like the lawful good. He's probably a bit of a, chaotic neutral.
Okay.
In that sense. He uses his power to kind of sneak away from the guards, kind of make his getaways, draw people to, listen, gather information, disappear, right? Could be seen, good or bad, depending where you're, how you're looking at him in that sense. But what ends up happening is he ends up saving a couple of boys from these bandits. And then through that, he starts spreading out into kind of an informational system, where then with that, it starts drawing him into being, let's say, less of like self-focused, but then realizing that like, you've got these bandits, they're coming in. And so what he starts, getting is kind of roving back and forth. He's got a, kind of a growing thing where he's like gathering information from different townspeople where they've seen the movement. Plays his kind of bit as like a traveling showsman, minstrel, storyteller,
Yeah.
conjurer of cheap tricks of sorts. But then kind of through this is kind of foiling little bits of these bandits here and there. Obviously, like it's him and like the few of these people that he's saved over time. And sometimes like it'll just be people that stay in one of these towns, travel information. But then particularly these two kids that they're probably a bit older now, but he saved them when they were younger, that then now follow him around, probably go ahead of him, gather up what's going on, and kind of lead into going like, okay, this is where this is happening. And they might, they might be able to like, let's say, kick these bandits or brigands out of someone's, farm, but then on their circuit, they kind of go around and they just kind of little things like that. But, more or less using kind of a chaotic roaming, to never quite get caught, as they just kind of go on their merry way, more or less. But they are being drawn more to start addressing, at least as much as they can, this threat of the bandits. But being that it's just the few of them, it's not like they can, face this head on. But
Gotcha.
Turn them aside in the hedgerows and the where they might be able to despoil a hideout, break up their supply chains here or there as they come across them, not on a consistent basis because they're always moving around. But
do you have a name for this kind of the leader, the roving magician leader guy? Did you say his?
I don't think I had a name for him.
He sounds like a good character. I think we should name him.
Yellen.
Yellen or
Yellen, like yelling, but with an N instead of a ing.
I like
Yellen.
it. I like it. Yeah, Yellen. That's a great name.
Yellen.
Have you guys noticed that the first character I named is an X and then a Z and then a Y now?
That's good.
If we could get 23 more characters, we'll have the whole alphabet.
But you say he's picked up like maybe a couple of orphans and but now are grown up and more capable that are kind of joined his little crew.
Correct.
I kind of like this the whole notion of a Ka-tet coming together.
So I don't know why my brain does this. I have an interesting, so I don't really like the idea of just an enemy. It's the enemy on the other side of the territory that's attacking us, right? But with the introduction of this Ka-tet, I imagine he's kind of a storyteller, kind of a story collector, right? And what I think that the bandits are, they do in fact have the vestments of other nations on them, right? Sign and sigil of other nations on them, but they also find that they have the vestments of their nation. And it's what it turns out to be is a giant group of defectors from all nations, right? Who are kind of all obsessed with coming to and going to the mountain of fire, right? What it is a giant clutch of dragon eggs. And the emanations, the psychic emanations, aka the fire emanations, is coming off so strong that anyone who's weak of will who passes near there turns aside and begins to like care for it, right?
Yeah.
So you can call it a cult. It kind of looks like a cult at first, but it's not. It's like something else. But this Yellen, he's collecting information as he's traveling around, as he's doing this work. And it's like it's like a prophecy that's happening right now. Like there's no prophecy about the return of the dragons, but there is sort of the everyone's whispering about this thing that's happening, or that they can feel. Everyone can feel it because as the clutch gets closer and closer and closer to hatching, the sort of psychic emanations like continue to ramp up, right?
Yeah.
And this is what leads to people kind of going to the side, and for society to break down is like, it's kind of terrifying to be under kind of psychological, call it spiritual attack constantly. People start to do things that are irrational.
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think about like the kid in E.T., when he's at school, but E.T. is home and he's like sampling the liquor cabinet, and he gets like high as a kite and starts doing really odd things at school, because he's under that psychic
Right.
connection. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Exactly like that. And so that's what's sort of causing this breakdown that Yellen and his group are witnessing / kind of doing some things against / recording, It's like, this is the group of people who will have this story that we're telling when it's all done.
Yeah.
Whatever that all done may be. But I like this a lot. So we'll say that Xanath waited not 2 weeks, but we'll say he waited 2 months, right? To give Xander and his group a little bit more time out. So he waited like 2 months and then left in pursuit, right? Seth, do we want the Yellen and his Ka-tet members to come across Xander, or do we want to really run kind of 2 stories in parallel, looking at the world and what's happening from 2 different angles?
I guess I don't know. Maybe perhaps, and that might be a draw to him because he's, lawful good and might see that what they're doing is not, it's chaotic. It's
right.
And so it might be a side thing that's on his mind that he might send, like, okay, like he might kind of catch on, but he kind of foiled him and forgot about it. But then he shows up again. It's like, and he kind of like, wait, I think I remember this guy. And it's like, and then he might remember, oh yeah, that's right. Like he, started our carriage ablaze and, took all our provisions and like,
right.
Ran off. And that's who it was. And then he kind of like does the same thing again. And so it's like, it could be something like that, kind of to show too that, was it Yellen and his kind of gang, they are more of a, chaotic neutral.
Right. Okay, guys. I don't know why my brain does this. I have an incredible plot for the story, which we can fill in however we want. Can I tell it to you?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. No, a long time ago, humans and dragons lived together in peace.
But then the Fire Nation attacked.
Now they developed in parallel with each other, right, on this planet. They were not, no one's the invader. And it's a sort of a symbiotic relationship, yeah, where a dragon would be born and a human would connect with it, right? And the dragons had sort of a race of a certain type, a certain thought process, and the humans were of a race of a different type and a different thought process. But they would kind of help each other and balance each other out. This is how it had been forever. Some great sin happened. Some great terrible atrocity happened. Don't know who it was, dragons or humans, don't know who it was that enacted it, but there was a war. That war went on for hundreds of years, right? Just destroying the Great Breaking, right? The breaking of the world level, like all remnants from that time are gone. However, dragons still crave that connection, and humans also still crave that connection. But so what's happening, this giant clutch of eggs, like we're talking thousands of eggs up in the mountains somewhere, the reason why it's sending out these psychic emanations is because this is what would happen when in time long past, beyond memory, when a dragon would start to be birthed, people would bring their children there, and they would kind of like find their companion, and in order to facilitate that, the dragons would send out these emanations. That's why Xander went into the cave. That's why Xander found the egg of his dragon.
Yeah.
Right? So what's happening is that's why people are coming and caring for the eggs, because it's sending out, come, we're about to hatch. And there's so many of them. That's why it's so powerful. And
so I do. Okay, sorry.
one of the things you see is the fact that people are kind of leaving, the more you go to it, the more you're drawn to it. And so they're not trying to say, come so we can eat you. It's just like an internal thing that's just like, I'm about to hatch soon. This is how, another genetic memory type of thing. This is how we've always done it. So come, right? At some point in time, they're all going to hatch. And if they don't have a person to bond with, they'll go feral or whatever, And so at some point in the story, people are going to begin to move, abandoned towns, abandoned cities, and kind of travel to this thing, kind of not really knowing why, but kind of knowing why. Right. And so Xander at first sees this as another country trying to, he comes to a town that's completely empty and he's sure that they were all killed,
Mm-hmm.
And then Seth is like following a different set of scriptures about how things should go. And so he is like, we have to stop this abomination, whatever this is, because it's not according to what's written in the book,
Yeah.
But there's like, I don't know, that kind of, in my brain, that kind of connects up a bunch of the little things, a bunch of the little like reasons why, and kind of lends itself to a great reveal or a final battle or something at the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I have something I was gonna in actually put it in earlier, but this might be, and you can say no, this might not be a good idea, but it might be what the, let's say, breaking would have been years ago.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
So you have the symbiotic bond between the dragon and the person, right? And then they can kind of share that, learn, and grow together. However, I mean, I don't know if this would be like an interesting way to say, like, let's say throughout the story, as another dragon hatches, right? There's an amount of like collected memory, because I thought of this when you were talking about like the collected memory thing.
Yeah.
Right. But then as like more dragons possibly start hatching, is it Xander's dragon?
Yes.
Like starts like not like forgetting stuff, but like losing like memory, like ancient memory that he seems to have.
Oh.
Right. And so that's the breaking, is dragons started realizing the less dragons there were, I gain more, almost like what's that Jet Li movie, The One?
Right.
So he has the one version of himself going and killing the other version of himself and all the kind of realities so that he can gain more power. Right. So like all the dragons hold like the genetic and like wisdom memory of their forebears. Right. And so then what started happening is some dragons like, okay, I'm only going to lay one egg. Right. Because then what I'm making is like a powerful sibling, or not sibling, but offspring. Right.
Right.
Because then if I have multiple like clutches, is that, if that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Then I'll just have a bunch of dumb dragons. Right. Well, that was, let's say, evened out by pairing with people. Right. That then would bring an individual wisdom. And then what people found was, unlike the dragons who are, let's say, wiser in fewer numbers, right? Because then fewer of them are now holding on to the collective memory of all of their forebears. Right. And the more of them there are, then that's spread out. So one dragon might know some things or remember some things from their, lineage. And then this other one will remember these things. Right.
Yeah. I think
but good. Humans are the other way, where then in numbers, right, then you can gather together and reason and read the old writings and contemplate what they mean and learn, and like science, and right. And so
information is cumulative right. Right.
And so that was the great breaking, right, where you had different factions saying, no, this is like, this balances it out. No, we want this power. And so you had, several different factions of dragons fighting just to kill off other dragons. You had, let's say the paired groupings trying to fight for like, oh, this was kind of how it's like been. And then some people going, well, we can be wiser without the dragons. We'll just kill all the dragons, right? And
yeah, people saying the temperance that I learned with a dragon is in fact not good.
Yeah.
I don't need the temperance and the wisdom that I learn with the dragon, because I can figure it out myself, and that way I'll be better at it, or what, for whatever. I think that's a really good that's a really good explanation for the breaking, rather than just a war
Yeah.
or a sickness or something.
Absolutely. And then there's that, you have those battles within the human psyche where I don't want the restraint. I want to be free to like self-actualize, as they would say back in the 70s, to expand my great potential, unfettered by all these restrictions, because human evolution is good, right? We're going to be better and better as we grow wiser. We will be like God, knowing good from evil,
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh, guys, I think this is a really, really good one. I am actually really excited for this. In fact, I was contemplating with the new year if I was going to write a short story again, like I did last time. And I think that I am, and I'm pretty sure I found the one I'm going to write. So I was thinking of some other ones, but I'm pretty sure this is the one. We'll have to see how it ends. My ending might be a little bit different, but that's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. If you like this episode, send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Follow us and message us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We are happy to hear from you. We are happy to talk to you. Bye.